Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast. This is episode 224, and this is the SE Etc. series of the SE Podcast. I'm Chris Hadnagy, the CEO of Social-Engineer LLC and the Innocent Lives Foundation and the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since way back in 2009. And wouldn't be a good dumpster if I wasn't with my buddy, the best dumpster diver I know, Patrick Laverty. Nice to have you in the dumpster with me, man.
Hey, Chris, so excited to be here trudging through this dumpster dive of podcasts. I'm super excited to be here. Like you said, my name is Patrick Laverty, I'm the senior team lead here at Social Engineer, where I get to lead a team of incredible professional certified social engineers through all types of engagements, phishing, impersonating, everything that we get to do is a whole lot of fun. So let's get to it.
Okay, well, before we get to the topic, a few quick announcements. If your company is dealing with social engineering attacks, and I shouldn't even say if, let's just make that a statement. Your company is dealing with social engineering attacks. Every company is, and that's a sad fact today. And what we saw, and I think one of the recent reports, is that close to 90% of all breaches have something to do with social engineering. And a lot of people are wondering, how can we possibly make a dent in keeping our people secure? How can we increase that human firewall? Well, here at Social Engineer, we have a series of managed services centered around phishing, vishing, smishing, and impersonation, the four main vectors of social engineering that help your company stay safe and your people realize how they can report properly and stay safe from social engineering attacks. Right now, vishing has gone through the roof, especially since pandemic. We've seen the vishing attacks really increase. So if you are dealing with that in your organization, reach out to us. Go to our brand new website at social-engineer.com. Check out our services page and see how we might be able to help you. I have a really exciting announcement about some new training. I said this on a couple other episodes, but I'm going to keep saying it until October 23rd. Why? Because I wrote a master's level social engineering class about 8 years ago. But it wasn't public. We only invited previous students. So for the first 7 years, to get to that class, you had to come to our foundational aspects of social engineering or our practical application of social engineering courses, which were known as the APSE or the OSINT classes or the CIRA classes way before we changed their names. And if you came to those classes and you did well, then we invited you to the master's level course because it's so intense and it's such a big, deep course that we wanted to make sure the people that were coming could handle it. But over the last couple of years, we've had a lot of requests from government organizations or large companies, maybe where they have professional SEs that have been doing this as their career for many, many years and didn't feel they needed the first two classes that we offer, that they'd actually be able to test out of those. But they wanted to come to the master's level. So this year, we're doing just that. We're honoring all the requests. So October 23rd through 27th, we're inviting anyone who wants to come to the MLSE class to sign up now. Now, there's only 16 seats available, and I think there's not all of them are left. I think there's only half of the seats are left right now. But if you want to come to that class, it is a 5-day pure red teaming class. So you'll be with Patrick, Ryan, Shelby, and myself. 4 instructors in that class because of the intensity of it. 5 days, you're going to be vishing, phishing, picking locks, cloning RFID, breaking into an office, nighttime breaches. I'm not going to even go through it all. You can check it out on social-engineer.com. We have payment plans now because we know it's an expensive course. You don't have to pay for it all up at once. So run on over to social-engineer.com, go to training, check out MLSE, and get yourself to that class. It's a one in a lifetime. I'm not sure if we'll do it again, open to the public. We'll see how this year goes, but we're running a test to see what happens. So we invite you to check that out. Also, if you love the topic of social engineering, you need to join myself, Patrick, and the whole SE team in our Slack channel. We have about 1,500 people now, maybe over that, last time I checked, that are in that channel every day talking about all aspects of social engineering. And we even have help with a Pretext if you do this for a living. We have people in there that get together a couple times a month and they practice social engineering vectors, talking about it from family avenues, all different ways that we talk about SE. If you like that topic and you want to keep it family friendly and legal, then you can join us in our Slack channel. If you can't find the link in the show notes, just hit up Patrick or I on LinkedIn. We're more than happy to invite you into that channel. We want you to be there because it's a really great place. We even have a job board. I think over 10 people have found employment as of now. They come in, people are posting jobs or people looking for work, and they post that. And then we've had 10 people match up. So it's been really, really great. And I also want to invite everyone that's listening to take a moment to go visit the Innocent Lives Foundation at innocentlivesfoundation.org. If you're not familiar with our foundation over there, 6 years ago, we started a group of InfoSec professionals that wanted to help law enforcement geolocate and track down people who traffic children and create child abuse material. We've been so successful, almost 500 cases now in law enforcement's hands, and we've been able to work really hard on saving kids and stopping child predators. And I'm super excited about our announcement for September 23rd. We're running our very first gala over in LA. If you want to come and join us there, it's hosted by the one and only LeVar Burton, which I am super excited. You can probably tell with a smile on my face. I am super excited about that because LeVar has been a hero of mine since I was way younger. And his devotion to kids throughout his career has just been tremendous. So we want to bring him in, and he's going to help us put on that gala and really make it an unbelievable event. You can find out more information at innocentLivesFoundation.org/GALA. And you can find information about where it is, how to get there, what the tickets are, all that kind of stuff. So check that out. And also, I want to invite everyone to go check out the best rock and roll band on planet Earth, which is Clutch. They are the opening and closing music for this podcast if you're listening to it on iTunes or Spotify or one of the audio methods. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you should still go check them out at pro-rock.com. Why? Because they are awesome, and they love ILF, and they're just a great rock and roll band. And if you really want to enjoy them and you haven't yet, then you need to go do it live, because that is the best way to consume Clutch music. Okay, last, before we start, if you really like the content that we put out there, if you're enjoying the conversations Patrick and I are having or any of the other podcasts, hit that like button. Give us a thumbs up, put a comment and down below. Let us know what you think, and let us know any questions that you have or topics that you want us to discuss in future podcasts. A lot of these topics come from you, the listeners, either in our Slack channel or on YouTube comments, where we get to hear what you're thinking. And then we take those comments, and Patrick puts them in a list, jumbles them all up, and puts his hand in the dumpster, picks one out. And that's the topic for the month. And usually he never even tells me, because I ask him every month. And what does he say? Come back next month to find out. It's really irritating, isn't it, folks? Tell him how irritating it is in the comments, okay? Maybe we can get him to change. We can try. So, Patrick, when you put your hand in the dumpster today, what topic have you picked out for us?
All right, let's start talking about topics. First, on the topic of Clutch, I love how you mentioned that they are the opening and closing music for this podcast, which also, when you and I were recently on an on-site engagement, Clutch was being played the entire time. And I even remember you saying Clutch is the best way to get ready for this engagement. And then even when we were done and after we were highly successful, I guess we can say, with everything that we got into, you were like, the best way to debrief from an engagement like this is by listening to Clutch, which we did the whole way through. So that was pretty amazing. It sure did.
Don't you feel part of our success was because of Clutch?
I don't think we would have been as successful without Clutch.
I have to agree. Now, there's no scientific proof of that, but we can ask Abby to do some research.
No, let's not ask Abby.
I think she'll find. Okay, we won't ask Abby. Yeah, she doesn't. She listens to boring music anyway, so we won't ask her.
Abby will not be on board with the scientific part of that. So she'll just say no way. But also, referring to Abby reminds me that we have 4 different podcasts here. So we have that we do each month, where you talk to a C-level executive each month. You also talk to a thought leader in the industry, somebody that's usually pretty smart about things. You also have one where you talk with Abby. The doctor is in. So Dr. Abby Moronio, and you talk about the different scientific aspects of social engineering. So when we came up with those 3, we figured there's 4 weeks in a month. We need a 4th one. So let's have one where we talk about anything, or as we refer to, the dumpster diving of podcasts, because you never know what you're going to get, just like you were just talking about, that you never even know what you're going to get on this podcast. It's stressful. So it's a whole lot of fun. Now, a few episodes ago, we talked about your book, Human Hacking. And then also in the last episode, we talked a little bit about trying to figure out how to have difficult conversations with people. And sometimes those can even be with your own children. I think we referenced in the last episode conversations with our own children. And a little light bulb went on for us, where you remembered that there are a ton of free resources available with your book. And one of those resources is a 10-step outline on how to have these types of conversations. So I thought, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how to talk about things. So if we go to the Human Hacking book and you log in, create an account in there, you get access to these resources. And you wrote this outline on how to have these types of conversations. How did this outline come about?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I had a group of parents that wrote to me when the book came out, that were using the book to deal with their kids, and they were using all the skills. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I got in a call with one, and I was asking, like, tell me more about this. Like, are you SEing your kids? And they're like, no, we're just using all the skills that you put in the book to make ourselves better parents. Mm-hmm. Then about 8 months ago, I was teaching a foundational aspect of social engineering class. And like I do with every class, I ask every student, why are you here? Tell me what you're doing here. What's your purpose? And I had this one guy said, I came to the class just to be a better father. And I'm like, really? Like, you paid all that money and came here? And he's like, yeah. I had some friends that read your book and they said it really helped them as a parent. And of course, when I wrote the book, that wasn't in my head, but I thought, I've used these skills with my kids. And it sounds like when you say that, people go, oh, you're manipulating them. No. And that's why I wrote this document, because I figured in work, you're going to have difficult conversations. In life, you're going to have difficult conversations. So when these difficult conversations come up, having a written plan can help you to accomplish the goal of that conversation much easier. So that's how this document came about.
Excellent. Yeah. And one of the things you said in there was also where you asked, are you SEing your children? And that's probably a common thought that's going to come up. So I think we should also go back and kind of differentiate that we're not manipulating anybody, where you've defined manipulation before as one side gets what they want and the other side doesn't get what they want. And we've also described social engineering as a conversation with a purpose. So I think that's the way to frame this, is that I think every parent can agree that they have conversations with a purpose with their children. And they might not know the best ways to do that or want extra tips. Mm-hmm. So that's exactly what this outline is going to be. And if you look at it, we see that it's 10 steps. The first step that you have on there is to map your terrain, where one of the things that you talk about is to figure out the DISC profile and what's going to be the likely state of mind, who's going to need this conversation more, and what happens if the request is denied. So what is, in a super brief way, because we could fill up a whole podcast with this, what is somebody's DISC profile?
So we talk about communication profiling, and like you said, we could fill a whole podcast with this, but if you just read that section of the book, it helps us to see that you have 4 quadrants. So you have people who are task and direct. Then you have people who are direct and people oriented. Then you have people who are people and indirect, and then people who are indirect and task. So you have the DISC in that quadrants, and understanding how someone likes to communicate can help you to learn what words and how to speak to them in a way that they will be more willing to listen to you. Like for me, I'm a very direct communicator. So, and I love this story about you, Patrick, because you had one time had to come and tell me you disagreed completely with the decision I made for your team. And the way you did it was epic. We got in a call and you said, hey, that email you sent, I think you're 100% wrong. And I was like, okay, great. Tell me why. And you walked me through very, very short, detailed, this is why. And I'm like, yep, you're right. Let's change it. And if you had come in and tried to give me all these compliments or, give me 100,000 details, I would have been like, my eyes would have rolled back and I'd have been like, I'm done. Like I don't want to hear this, because I like really direct communication. So knowing that if I was the kid or if I was the person having to be talked to in this, if I'm a direct communicator, then coming to me that way is going to make me more prone to want to listen to what you have to say.
And that certainly worked in that kind of situation. Now, there's another sub-bullet point here that is what's going to be the likely state of mind. And I think sometimes when we're talking to our children, that's going to be something that is extremely important, because I know there are times when I got in trouble as a kid. It's like, uh-oh, dad's coming home, mom's coming home, I'm in trouble. Yeah. And you're just immediately scared and not really looking for that conversation. I've had some of these types of conversations with my own child where I can tell when my kid's, a little bit nervous about this. So one of the things that I've tried to do is to try to frame it at a time that I know we don't have the stress going on, and in a way that isn't going to cause any kind of bad state of mind. Do you have any kind of other tips with this part of it?
No, that's beautiful. And I think what helps with this for parents is if you actually do fill this out, even if you just do it mentally, don't fill it out flippantly. Don't be like, oh, they're gonna be, over emotional, or they're gonna be flippant. Like, don't do that. Like, really think about, like, how is your kid gonna feel when you say, hey, I want to talk about that situation the other day? Like you said, I remember being a kid. That comes up right away. You're feeling fear. Like, am I in trouble? So all of that emotion, you need to understand it, because that will help you as we move down these 10 steps with what happens. And then in this category, the next two parts are like, who needs the conversation more? In the setting with family, it's always mutual, right? It's always going to be mutual. And then what happens if your request is denied? You need to understand what's at stake here. So if you go to your kid and said, I really want to talk about that, and she's like, nope, not talking to you, well, then what's the outcome, right? And you need to know that, because the issue is, a lot of times when parents approach a conversation like this, they don't get what they want right away. Then they resort to a different pretext, which we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, we need to remember that while we're talking about this in the context of speaking with our children, any of these things can be done for any other types of conversations as well. This could be like a manager subordinate conversation at work. This could be in a personal, maybe romantic relationship. Any of these types of things can be used in any of those areas as well. So step number 2 that you had on here is to define your goal. I can't imagine that you could have this type of conversation if you have no idea what your goal is. What is really going to be the outcome? So how specific does somebody need to be when they're figuring out their goal? Is it just to have the conversation, or is it to get what I want?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because I think, especially if we're talking about speaking to our kids, they broke a house rule. So we're angry, we're maybe disappointed. So we may think our goal is to met out discipline. Our goal is to, figure out what we're going to do to them to get them to understand that they did something wrong. But to me, that would be like not the right way of approaching this conversation. If you're approaching it that way, the goal is skewed. So like for me, I think of, well, what I really want to know is why. Like, why did my daughter do the thing she did? Why did she make the choice to disobey the rule? Were there other factors that led to that choice? And I think if I approach the goal that way, then it's not about meting out discipline or proving that I'm angry or making her understand that she was bad. Like, all of those things really shouldn't be part of the goals. It's more of, I want to understand why you did what you did, right? Let's try to figure that out, and then we can go from there.
So after you figure out the goal, one of the next things that you have on this list is to decide on your pretext. Now, I know there are times when we think of our pretext as being like this super made up thing where we're making up names, we're coming up with some kind of crazy story out of the blue. But I think that's probably not going to work in a situation where you're talking to your children or talking to some close friend. Is deciding on your pretext possibly even as simple as whether you choose good cop, bad cop kind of thing, whether you sit with your child and you start, very quiet and start explaining, it's okay, let's talk about this, versus why did you do that type of thing?
Yeah, I think that's really the point in this, is because you don't want to ever, with your family or friends, or if you're using this from a personal level, come up with a fake story. Like we did for this break-in, we were cable installation people or cable repairmen, right? You wouldn't want to do that with your kid, like start a online chat with them as one of their friends from school to find out like what, that's going to ruin trust in the long run. So that's not really a great plan. When I think about this, I think I have two options as a dad. I can do exactly what you said, kick the door in and be like, I demand answers. You broke the house rules and you're going to tell me exactly what. Or I can approach this as the concerned parent, the concerned dad. Like, I really was worried. Now, why I say this is such an important step is because when you choose that pretext, just like we do here at SECom, you cannot alter from it. So even if the conversation does not go the way that you are hoping it goes, doesn't mean you change your pretext to angry parent, right? So for me, it's like, I'd rather be concerned parent, but if I'm not getting compliance, I don't then start punching a wall or yelling and screaming. You stick to that pretext, because sometimes, especially with kids, they'll test you out to see, and especially if this is new for you, if you've handled things differently before and now you're going to try a different method. At first, they may be like, what the heck? What's happening? Dad doesn't talk to me. He usually yells at me, right? So if you're going to change it up, you may need to, maybe make sure mentally you're ready to stick to that pretext through and through, no matter what happens in that conversation.
and to make sure that they're not just waiting you out through your nice, good cop pretext to see if you're going to get to it. You just keep with it and see if you can get there. Then the next step that you have in here is to come up with your rapport building, how to build rapport, which sounds a little bit crazy in the context of dealing with your children, where you probably already have some great rapport with your kids. But I'm thinking that there are some other ways that you can build up rapport. Like the first thing that comes to mind for me is a mistake that my child might make. And I might open it up with, I've done that same thing before. I understand, but let's talk about why that wasn't the best decision and the lessons that I learned when I did that. So let's talk about those types of experiences. And now that puts them into this mindset of dad understands where I'm coming from. So it might open that up a little bit more versus why did you do this?
See, so you used liking because, people that are like each other, and you used reciprocation, right? And that one thing, because you made it that I understand and I'm going to give you a story. So hopefully you'll give me a story back, right? So when you go into a conversation, understanding the principles of rapport and influence, and you plan which ones to employ, now you have an idea of how this conversation should go, right? And just like what you said, that is a great way to start the conversation off. And having that plan means you kind of like you're figuring out your entrance and your exit plan, right? And doing that, I think, makes a conversation better. People go, this sounds like you're planning too much, or you're trying to figure out what the kid's going to do. You can't control what your daughter does, even if you approach it perfectly. But what you can do is control your reaction. And when you have a plan, your reaction will be much better. So I think that's a great part. And then once you follow up with rapport building, the fifth step is figuring out which principles of influence and elicitation that you're going to use, right? So you have to look through again, in the book, they're there, or you can use Cialdini's book, but we look through those principles and say, and then it's nice to do like a what do they call it? Like a spot check. Like if in my rapport building, I've used yours, I put liking and reciprocation, but then in influence, I put strong authority. Ooh, well, those two don't match. So it might be good for me to do a spot check and say, I think my influence principles are going to ruin my rapport building techniques. So it's nice to kind of look at that. And it also helps you with your pretext that you say, oh, yeah, maybe if I'm trying to be concerned dad, coming in as authority figure isn't the greatest influence principle to use. So you kind of, as you're building this out, it's helping you see, oh, if to keep that pretext, what principles of rapport and influence are going to help me keep that pretext? So that kind of works like right through step 5 there.
Yeah. And I think there's probably going to possibly eventually be a stage when authority kicking in the door works, when you've had these conversations 3, 4, 5 times and it's not sinking in.
Yep.
It might not work at that point, and like you said, this does go right into the next step, figuring out these influence techniques that you want to use. You mentioned a couple in there already with the liking and the reciprocity ideas, but there can also be things or authority that you mentioned. Social proof, like, are your friends doing this? Like, your best friend doesn't do that type of thing, so why do you do it? Type question might be, as well as the consistency. Like, you've never done this before. What's going on? What's different now? Could be a couple different ways to use these. Do you have any other?
Well, understanding. I like the social proof one because understanding that can also help to determine, like, was it peer pressure?
Yeah,
that led your kid to doing the thing that she never did, right? And understanding that principle of influence can work either way. Like, you can use it to help her feel more comfortable to talk to you, but maybe it was also used against her to get her to do something that she's never done before. So understanding that can help us also when we're talking to our child to realize that principles of influence might have been used against them without them even knowing, to get them to take that action. And that can help us to be a little more understanding.
And one of the other principles that's in there is concession. And when I first saw that, I was like, how in the world can you use concession here? But then, like, maybe we have a situation where we have a bedtime, we have a curfew, and our child, for some reason, decides they want to surpass that. As part of our conversation, maybe concession comes up. It's like, okay, yeah, you are getting a little bit older now. Maybe a 7 p.m. curfew bedtime makes no sense. So let me concede. Let me give you the concession. You want to do 9 o'clock now, 10 o'clock? That can work.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you might be thinking with?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and also just like I also that's a great example. But I was also thinking sometimes, like you said this in the beginning, choosing the right time to be able to have that conversation is great. And let's say you choose a time that you think, hey, this is going to be a good time. Like we're making dinner together, we're cleaning the kitchen, this is going to be relaxed. But for some reason, you start the conversation and she's just not into it. Maybe she's not feeling great today. Something happened that just, not even this situation, something happened at school, something happened with one of her friends. Concession can be, hey, you know what? I thought this was going to be a good time, but why don't we hold this conversation off until later or tomorrow? Maybe when you're feeling a little bit better. I've had those days where my daughter comes home, she's super stressed from work, had a really long day, and I wanted to have a conversation with her about something. And I realized just when she walked in by looking at her face, nope, not tonight. So concession for me is not even bringing it up. She doesn't know that I conceded. But part of that is realizing that concession might be moving that whole conversation to a better time. So yeah, you use these principles and it can help you in even planning out the conversation so you don't plan it out wrong.
And as far as being able to elicit information from them to keep the conversation going, because I think we've probably also all experienced conversations, especially with our children, where they just completely clam up and they don't want to answer anything. They might be afraid to answer. And I think one of the great rapport building or elicitation techniques that you can use here is with our open-ended questions, asking our who, what, why, where, when types of things. Like, what were you thinking when you did this kind of thing? Why did you want to do this? What was your goal? Is that a good technique to be able to get more information, to elicit the information you're looking for from the person you're speaking with?
So yes, but I say this in class when it comes to SE, we have to be cautious with why. Why can be very interrogative if we use it too many times, right? So if we're in the conversation with our child, we're like, why would you do something like this? Why did you make this choice? So those kind of questions are great. They're open-ended, but using it too many times can almost feel like we're interrogating the child, to like pulling the flashlight out, like, why didn't you come home before curfew, kind of thing. So when we use those elicitation techniques, just try to keep in mind, like, reflective questions are a great way. If they say something being like, oh man, so you were stressed out. Right. And then just repeating that back and having them, encouraging them to tell you more, as opposed to using interrogative type questions, especially if it's a stressful circumstance. And the one great thing about being in this circumstance is that we have a good baseline with our kids. We know them. We know them their whole life. They're there since they were born. So having that baseline with our child, we'll get to know when we look at them and see, oh, they're experiencing high discomfort, or they're not really feeling comfortable. So that can help us move our type of questions and elicitation that we use to something that might make them more comfortable and less discomfort being shown.
Yeah, I like how you bring that up, because I just remember a conversation that I had with my daughter yesterday, where I walked into her room and she was like under her blankets, reading her phone, all kind of spread out. And I'm like, I just kind of sat down in her bed. I'm like, all right, we need to talk about something. She immediately took the blankets off, sat up in the bed, and I could tell she just kind of tightened up a little bit. So one of the things that I always have to do is just be like, everything's okay. You're not in trouble. We're not talking about anything that you did wrong. And you can immediately see even just the shoulders just kind of, oh, okay, good.
I love it.
We're just going to talk about fun things here. So we're about halfway through the 10 steps, and this is probably a good place for this 6th step, which is to run a quick manipulation check to make sure that we are not manipulating. Where we mentioned earlier, the difference between our social engineering and manipulation is with our SE, we want everybody to win. We want a win-win situation. We want the other person gets what they want. Everybody's happy. Where manipulation is, I get what I want, but you get nothing what you want. Yeah. So how do you, in the middle of this interaction, run a quick manipulation check?
So, you think about, like in my head, when I was writing this, what I thought about is, if I'm sitting there and the conversation's not going the way I want, will I be tempted to start threatening punishment? Like if she's sitting there tight-lipped, she crosses her arms, she looks down, she's not answering me, she's kind of giving me the frown or answering in grunts, which anyone who was a kid has had this, kind of thing. am I going to now be like, okay, that's it. If you don't tell me anything right now, grounded for 30 days. Oh, nothing? 35 days. Oh, 40 days. And is that going to be it? So you want to make sure that you don't fall into manipulative tactics because you're not getting the results that you want. And that's easy to do as a parent, right? We do have authority over our kid and we may want that results. But if we go that route, we've just blown all the previous 5 steps. Now in step 6, we've blown it all. Our pretext, everything we built, all that rapport, all the positive influence, we basically just shot a hole in it and it sunk to the bottom of the ocean because we've blown it all out with that. And that's what she's going to remember is those threats. And next time we come in and we try to do the whole calm, concerned dad thing, she's going to be like, yep, I know where this is going. And it's going to build that anticipation. So we really want to make sure that we're double checking ourselves that we don't fall into that trap, right? That's really, really important.
And I think it can also go even in the other direction. Sometimes if things are going too well, that we're getting everything we want, we might get a little bit greedy. We might keep pushing and pushing, trying to get more and more out of this, eventually to the point where our other person later on realizes like, holy cow, I gave up way too much in that.
Yeah.
They're not feeling too good about that conversation anymore where
Yeah.
you were manipulating that situation because you just, maybe we had that amygdala hijacking thing going on, something where they were just in the moment willing to give up anything, especially where you have that authority, and they just let you keep going with it. So I think that's going to take us back to our original goals. Are we getting to our goals? And are you then pushing past that a little bit as well? Yeah. And then the next step we already talked about just a little bit, which is to pump up those nonverbals to make sure that they are seeing things in a good way that is going to keep them open to the conversations, which, you know, I mentioned how my daughter will just shoot right up and immediately tense up a little bit and want to show that, you know, she's a little bit nervous about this. And I try to relax. And I think you also mentioned that you can sometimes read in your children when they're a little bit tense, when they have something different on their face because they have the baseline as well. What types of nonverbals were you kind of thinking that you want to have at this stage?
Yeah. So, you know, to me, you mentioned it, like the baseline, understanding our kids' baseline, you know, like I tell this story in class all the time. Both of my kids are very jittery and they're jittery all the time. That's not just when they're uncomfortable, but to me, that's a comfort sign. So my son's leg moves all the time. My daughter has this foot that's always going. So, you know, when I look for those signs, I go, okay, these are the things that make me know my kid is feeling comfortable right now. Like that's it. If they stop, then I start to go, okay, wait, what's happening? Something's changed, right? So you want to know. I also know, like, you know, hey, my daughter's going to hate this, but, you know, eye rolls are a common thing, you know, so like the tone of voice that they may have when they're happy or when they're angry. I think about that thing, RSVP, rhythm, speed, volume, pitch, right? So my daughter tends to be very high pitched, loud, big gestures when she's comfortable. When that changes, everything gets lower and smaller and kind of like that. So you start to look at those things and notice that to say, hey, you know, when I ask that question, something changed. You don't say this. You don't say it ever out loud. You don't call it out, but it's something for the parent to notice like, hey, that changed. What does that indicate? Please, parents listening to this, do not automatically jump on the bandwagon that means she's lying. She just lied to me. That does not indicate deception. It can just indicate a change from comfort to discomfort, and that is it. So just understanding those nonverbals can help you to know what is common and what things do I need to be aware of. And then even more importantly, my nonverbals, right? So if I tend to, you know, get the angry eyebrows when I'm thinking, it's going to be really important that I'm not doing that. Or I'm also a big gesturer. So if I'm getting angry, my gestures may be a little more direct and not so open. And if that's the case, she's going to read that. And even if I'm making all the wonderful pretext that I'm concerned, friendly dad, if my face and my gestures don't match that, their brain is going to read what is nonverbal before what is verbal. So it's really important that we know their standard nonverbals and also ours, so we can be much more aware of that.
And I think this is a lot of information that we're giving to people right here, and a lot for people to think about where they're trying to figure out their pretext, their tone, their manipulation, and reading the other person's body language, as well as thinking about what body language I'm putting out at the same time. But again, these are all just kind of suggestions and things that people can practice. to get better at them. And another of the things that I really like that you mentioned in there is when you read something on the person that you're talking to, don't call it out. Don't tell them, oh, I see this on you right now. And how many times, especially when your kids were probably younger, that you could detect when they were lying to you. And it blows the kid's mind when, as a parent, you can be like, no, I know you're lying right now. Yeah. And eventually you can kind of break that down and like, how did you know? And it's like, I'm not telling. Meanwhile, you just know it's because, you know, when your kid lies, maybe they look a certain way, or maybe they look down, or maybe they tense up. But as a parent, you figure those things out. And it's probably not a good idea to say, I know it because you do this.
Yeah. And not only that, but it's during an emotional conversation, when you call out someone's emotions, it can be embarrassing. And that embarrassment can go against getting your goal of the conversation. Right. So if our goal is to find out why was this house rule broken, what can we do to avoid this next time? Are you safe? If we start calling out, oh, well, when you move your leg this way, I think it means that, or wow, you just furrowed your brow, or you shrugged one shoulder, that means you're probably not telling me the truth. Like if you do all these things, it's just going to frustrate them. And now they're going to feel like anything I'm being analyzed. And none of us would like that. None of us would feel good about that. If I was sitting in a room with someone and I felt every movement I made was being judged, I would feel so uncomfortable with myself. So we wouldn't want to do that to our children, especially if in the beginning our goal was, hey, I want to get this conversation. I want to find out if you're okay and what we can do to fix the problem next time. You're not going to achieve it if you embarrass your kids.
So that takes us to step number 8, to conduct an authenticity check. And I want to see if this is the type of thing that you might be referring to. Like in a conversation with my child, one thing that I have never done and would never do, and I would imagine it would kind of be off-putting if I were to do it. It's okay, sweetie. You can talk to me. Everything that you did, sweetie, is going to be perfect. That's not how I talk to my kid. So if I did, that would be inauthentic, and she'd probably be thinking, what is he doing right now? I don't understand. Is that what you mean with conduct the authenticity check?
Yeah. I mean, if we've never had a calm, pleasant conversation with our kid, then we may want to call that out first. Like say, hey, I want to have this conversation with you. And I know normally I'm the guy who's screaming and yelling and making all these angry gestures. So I'm going to try to be different today. Okay. Are we cool with that? Like I would do that. Like I remember the first time, because I am a very loud person that happened. I actually did. I called it out. I said, look, I want to talk to you about what happened, but I want to do it different than I normally do. So maybe we can both try, right? And I'm going to try this thing where I'm going to be really calm and I'm going to stay calm. And her first thing was like, yeah, right. Right. And I had to be like, no, Chris, don't get angry. No. And I didn't say that out loud in my head. I'm like, because I wasn't that way. Right. So it's like so I called it out. Now, after you do it 1, 2, 5, 10 times, right? But like you said, you're a naturally calm person. But if you don't talk to your daughter that way, and all of a sudden you come in and do that, she's going to be like, what the heck? And now she's not believing the pretext. She's too busy analyzing you. Like, why is that? Like, what's going on here? Are you okay? Like, you having a heart attack? Did you smoke something? What's going on, right? Like, why are you talking to me in this manner? So it needs to be authentic. And it also our nonverbals need to match what we're saying. Again, if I'm showing very terse, angry nonverbals, but I'm trying to be like, hey, everything's okay. I really need you to talk to me. They're going to be like, this is not matching. And our brains will always read the nonverbals stronger than they do the words. Right. What we do, not what we say. Right. is what happens all the time.
And one of those most common ones that we see where somebody's shaking their head no, but they're saying yes.
Yeah. Incongruency. Right. And we don't want to be incongruent because our kids read that. And since birth, our children are designed to read our nonverbals. That's how they know what's good and bad in life. Mm-hmm. Right. So they're looking at our faces all the time to know, is that dangerous? Is that okay? And that's how they grow up, right? So they're always looking at us to determine, what's going on. So just like we have a baseline on them, our kids have a baseline on us. So they know.
Sure do. So step number 9 is to prepare for likely contingencies. Now, is this where you kind of try to play out the conversation in your head ahead of time and try to get an idea of where it might go and try to think of different forks and figure out if they say this, then it's going to go that way? What was the thought with the
that wasn't it. That's great that you said that, and that maybe even need to be added. What I was thinking about with step 9 of the contingencies was like creating a hypothesis. Right? Anyone who's taken a college course, we have to like create a hypothesis. What do I think could be the reasons? Like, she's never done something like this. What could be the possible reasons why she did this? Could it be that she was pressured into making this bad decision? Could it be that she was threatened? Could it be that she's testing the boundaries? And I come up with these hypotheses or these contingencies because I don't want to be surprised if that's the answer. Like if she says, well, I was peer pressured, they were like, well, would you jump off a bridge if all your friends did it? Right? If I already have that in my head, that's one of the possibilities. Now, when she says it, I go, yeah, I kind of thought that might have been the case, and I can keep my pretext. Whereas if I don't have this planned out, they always say like not planning is planning to fail, right? Failing to plan is planning to fail. So you plan out what could be the possibilities. That way, when you hear it, it's not the first time you ever heard it.
Yeah, I think that makes great sense as well, which now takes us to the final step to solidify your gains. So upon success, what is your exit strategy? And is this also going to be about maybe not asking for too much? Maybe you had the great conversation. You both had a back and forth, both understand each other. You got everything that you wanted up front. And now you're like, everything's going so well. I'm going to keep going. I figured out how that we can extend that curfew from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Now we're going to talk about you got to eat your vegetables. Is that kind of an area? Should we end it where we achieved everything that we came in, or is it something different? Yeah. You don't want to bleed over into other categories at this point, right? Because if it worked well, like any other engagement, ending on a high note. This is maybe a silly comparison, but all of us have probably had a TV show that we loved. Mm-hmm. And it ended, series finale, right? And not season, but series finale. And we loved it. And it was great. And we still think about it. And we say, I wish that came back. I wish there was another season. But then we've had TV shows that we loved that lasted longer than they should have. And we're like, man, that show, the first 5 seasons were great. But man, season 6 through 10, they just went downhill. You don't want to do that with your conversation, right? If it's going great and you got your goal, for me, I wouldn't, because I haven't planned it out. I can't plan out what should happen next because I don't know what the reasons were. So I might even say, I really appreciate you being so open, talking to me. What I'd like to do is take some time to think about where we go from here. What has to happen because, you did break this house rule, but I was really concerned. I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad nothing bad happened to you, but let's continue this later and we can talk about it and end it with something pleasant, a hug, a kiss, reassuring and not, okay, now that I got all my answers, let me dictate what punishment will be, don't end it like that. And I say just what you said, don't drag it into another part of her life or something that she may need to improve. Stop that and do that another time. Make that another conversation. You do that so many times, your kid will begin to learn like, wow, man, when I have conversations with dad, I can open up with him. I can talk. And he is really concerned about me. He does want what's best for me. That's going to do wonders for your relationship with your kid. Yep. I think this has been pretty amazing being able to step through these 10 steps to give people a bit of an outline on how to discuss them. And if anybody wants to actually find the outline itself, they can go create a free account at humanhackingbook.com, where there's also a ton of other resources in there. So this has been a whole lot of fun talking about this.
Yeah, and we'll put a link to it in the show notes. Thanks for choosing this out of the dumpster. So, Patrick, next month, what's our topic?
Yeah. Okay. So I think for next month, we got a super fun topic that we're going to bring to everybody. And what they need to do to find out about that is tune in next month to find out. We're not telling you what it is. You need to check in to find out what that next topic is.
Tell you people, leave comments for Patrick.
Cue the clutch.
Cue the clutch. Thanks everyone for joining Patrick and I in the SC Etc. series, and we hope to see you next month. Stay safe, and until then, see you.